So this is what I want for my birthday. I want to do a round where you tell me the amazing story of the learning pod, this learning pod that started a movement. What happened? What did this learning pod do? How did they get written up in the New York Times?
By 2025, like 70% of the world's educational system, in quotes, because I don't like the words education, school, or teaching, had made its way into informal self-directed learning, which used to be called learning pods, but that ran into a whole bunch of sort of correctness and whatever and found a new name. I don't know, but it was kind of scaffolding for learning that was available to anybody, any place, that cost almost nothing. But that included a series of people who could be helpful in anybody's learning journey, and that included mechanisms for forming cohorts to learn different things, so that you weren't like intentionally isolated with kids who were born within 12 months of you for some reason, thinking that that was a good way to learn, or or that your same cohort needed to be the group that you learned everything with, which is also a stupid artificial way to create scarcity. So this future learning pod scaffolding wound up creating a much more educated citizenry, because anybody at any age could not only sort of go to Khan Academy 2025, but also could then connect that learning to their real world, to their neighborhood, to improve their neighborhood, to real problems about poverty and so forth. And as people formed into these cohorts, there were ways to bring people who needed a lot of help to get up into the platform, into this sort of scaffolding, and didn't have access, didn't have tools, didn't have even Wi-Fi or tools. There were ways to actually bring them up into the groups as they were forming. And people took it as their earliest projects to go help the groups that needed the most help, and to include the people who were underrepresented or just not even at the table in most policy discussions or other kinds of conversations, so that the learning that was happening actually changed people's lives and neighborhoods and watersheds, which made it like really compelling to do. So people would start opting in. They would sort of take a little step off of the compulsory education system and official education system off into this sort of scaffolding of pods and whatevers. And once they tried one thing and it worked pretty well, they would then sort of take more and more of their learning lives out into this world. So that the new scaffolding wasn't designed to topple the educational bureaucracy. It was designed to lure people away into a better way of learning, and then gradually replace the learning bureaucracy. Because every country knows that, give me your 7-year-olds and I'll change the world, because I'll basically indoctrinate them into my way of seeing the world.
They were not creating flipped classrooms, but by flipping the way people are actually connecting, either physically or digitally, got flipped over.
Interesting aspect was that once the resources were no longer or lack of resources was a hindrance, and once some of these very, very repressive frameworks like classrooms and stuff like that were taken out of the picture, a lot of kids that seemed dysfunctional started showing themselves to be actually highly functional human beings, and all of a sudden teachers started to realize that much more than having a calling to teach, they had a calling to learn. And once they started learning from all of these brilliant little people in front of them and all of the things that they had to offer, the dynamics just completely changed, and everybody's growth process just went on an exponential curve up.
In education, they discovered what Gibbons knew and the Romans knew, and Feynman quotes in his lectures notes, that the efforts of teaching are rarely of much efficacy, except in those favorable circumstances when they are almost superfluous. So you got to find that sweet spot. Don't try to teach.
Is that it's not about money. This really is not, yes, teachers are underpaid. Yes, there's a whole bunch of money issues right now, all sorts of resource issues, but fixing learning has little to do with money and everything to do with relevance, context, trust, and really shifting how the entire system and all of our expectations around it are changing. And some of that is already happening around us. So I think Google and a bunch of other companies wrote an open letter recently that basically said, hey, humans, you don't really need an advanced degree from one of these big universities to come work for us. We're really happy if you just sort of take this kind of practical exam or talk to some people, and we will consider hiring you. So that the credentialing requirement that was seen as the only way to get into large companies starts to go away. And there's like 50 of those things that need to happen, but some of those are actually already happening. And even better, this is tongue in cheek, 24 weeks ago, everybody got thrown out of real life and into Zoom and into the online world. Then, a third of those people tried to actually dutifully do curriculum and study and answer tests during that time, and most of those people had a pretty hideous time of it. Other people said, screw this isn't working for me, or I don't have access, or whatever. There's just this enormous opportunity for structural change that wouldn't be present had we not had the current cataclysm. Like just that, like the bureaucracy would be doing its terrific job of defending itself to this day if we hadn't gone into lockdown.
The whole educational system is based on the idea of fear. If you don't do it, I can promise you I'm gonna punish you. And they don't dare to say, well, actually, if you do good, you get good.
We kill the spirit of our children. We kill this empathy. We kill this curiosity. We kill this by making them be functional, by making them behave. It's fucked up.
For the next 3 months, education is just going to be a trail of tears.
It is.
There's going to be, people disillusioned and hurt and sick, and build network into those folks who end up completely disillusioned with the whole idea of education and schooling. And
Well, education implies I know it and I'm going to give it to you. I don't like that word, even though it's an institutional one. It's more like, and I think that we coined it in one of these calls a week or two ago, an invitation to learn, because that's really what this is about, is inviting each person to move from where they are to where they want to be by learning how to do it. And once you figure out that you can do that, then the world is wide open to you.
I performed very poorly in school as a child, and then when I went to university, when I was 25, I had taken the SATs, the GED, SAT, and got into college in the States, and all of a sudden I was on the dean's list, and I got grants and scholarships, and I was like a really good fucking student. My growth was exponential in comparison to my peers, on different levels, cognitive levels. And so it's like we do such a disjustice to children that overcome traumatic experiences, because they are absolutely highly intelligent, more resilient, the list goes on and on and on, and yet they somehow become seen as dysfunctional and are perceived as dysfunctional, and then become dysfunctional and behave and it's like it's the wrong focus.
And maybe this is just an elite audiences kind of thing, but learning pods as a term has already sort of been poisoned. And so I would come in from a different vector. I'd just use a different phrase. I would do exactly what you're saying with the stories. I just wouldn't call this learning pods.
I think learning pods are already in disfavor in some circles.
Before pandemic, you mean, or what?
No. Well, I don't know about them before pandemic. What's happening now with the elitism of the approach,
that's what I'm saying.
Terrible. So
that's what I'm saying. Once there have been a couple stories out there that say learning pods equals elite families with resources, isolating their kids. Once that's happened, I think you want to try to skirt the term and find a different way of describing this.
Well, would it be like something with seeds?
I don't know.
I talk about scaffolding, reefs, seeds, whatever, but just a different metaphor.
Seeds would be better than pods. Pods are at the end of life and seeds are at the beginning. So grow.
Or refer to fertile soil. Refer to not the seed, but the soil or something like that. Just flip the metaphor a tiny bit too.
Biome.
I'm going in a total different direction. I have 3 words that kind of popped into my head right when this question came up: block party, jam, and drum circle. And it's because of the spirit of those things and the interactions and what we were talking about, learning taking place, real learning being in experience and interaction and in these circles.
Point of view, they're children. They just like to connect, play, learn.
the same things. And you know, it's our imposition on them that, I guess, the traditions we come from, whether it's homeschooling or unschooling or democratic schooling or different forms of you know, religious schooling, it's not their deal.
For some kids, Wi-Fi and a tablet or a laptop is not the issue. It's personal safety. It's having enough to eat. It's being in a place where there's no place to actually even think. It's, you know, all those kinds of issues. And wishful thinking here, if we could create a system that solves for that in some way, that creates some slack, that loosens up some resources, that gives kids, that helps them address and overcome those issues, which turns into rapidly sort of group therapy and a bunch of other stuff. But that would be a great thing. That would be a phenomenal thing. If a piece of the bootstrappy part of this that Lauren's kind of describing actually addresses those really difficult issues that keep a lot of kids from even considering learning. And
I'm intrigued now because I have a 30-year-old daughter who was learning enabled as a little kid. And my best memory was when she got so into books reading in like the first or second grade that she actually stood up from a chair and walked to the bathroom reading the book and came back doing the same. And so I figured this kid's okay now. But once you get kids opened up to that, they just go off on their own. I think that's the piece that I'm excited to try to enable now, is how to create those opportunities for self-learning that become self-actualizing.
What I try to do as quickly as possible is to make a mom dashboard and have little cards for each of these things that we need to think of in a super quick solution. Because, like, for example, Jerry probably has like 200 links in his brain, but it would take like 200 hours to go through them and find that. I need like the quick start guide, because I don't have time. I don't want to do research. I just want a dashboard where I start here. And like, this is
simpler.
Yeah, kind of maybe like a cookbook. You do this and that and that, and then the notes. Oh, and if you know, don't pour oil into the fire, kind of stuff.
So Lawrence, I mean, so far, what do you got? What are the first steps and ingredients on the cookbook?
Well, I just realized that security might be one of them.
Yeah.
Lauren, I'll help you with that. That's my,
Thank
you
you.
know, what if you tell me how you want it talked about, I'll whip something up. It's my thing.
For instance, my thread might be science, art, and intergenerational learning all rolled together.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to scope a field, because innovation in the sciences is so dependent on creativity, which is greatly enhanced by arts in addition to sort of the content knowledge of, say, physical sciences. Because
yeah, but my response is that's not a thing, really. I don't think so. So the problem is you're trying to create an affinity group, but there's no, not yet, like a specific meme for that. So what we're trying to do is actually formalize this process of creating memes so you can at least get closer to these other people, and then a meme starts around that, and it gets like the babies basically similar ideas. You can get them to coagulate and get together and form a really like superstar idea that's very mimetic and memorable.
Yeah, my experience with that is in a collective community of innovators at the company I was with at 3M. And they had a lot of connectivity mechanisms within the structure of the company. They don't connect the people. They create a culture that fosters connection. So there's a cultural umbrella. I mean, I remember being told the very first week, you don't need to know the answer to everything, even though you're fresh out of school, but you can't leave a person hanging. If you don't know the answer, you have to say, I'll find someone who does. It was just a behavioral indoctrination. What this is doing is it's making each of us aware of the skill sets where our interests can intersect. I don't want to sound negative, but I'd like to just get lots of little experiments going instead of trying to coalesce the information. Because I think we'll learn so much from the little experiments. Personally, I'd rather spend less time sharing our knowledge, even though all the nuggets are fun to go chase, than hearing about an experiment that worked or failed. Anything that worked or failed. People who are chronic enablers or chronic doers, they're just going to grab an idea and go with it because that's who they are. And so if each of us can explore our circle of cohorts and say, who are the ones that jump on it and almost run away with it and you feel like they took your thing and went. But I had a wise professor once who said, there are way more ideas than people to do them, so just let them run. You got 4 more, right, Judy? And he's, yeah, I do.